Well, that was the incredible After Sun. I'm Anna Smith, host of the Girls on Film podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting the Q&A today for BAFTA. Let's bring on first the director, Charlotte Wells. Massive round of applause for you, Charlotte. And then stars Paul Mescal and Frankie. Please join us. Thank you. I can feel the enthusiasm in the room here. Congratulations. This is such a powerful film for me. I want to ask you, Charlotte, as such a distinctive filmmaker, what is your process? How do you set about starting the process of a film?
I thought we set up an easy question. That's a really hard question to answer. I think, like, writing took a long time on this. It took me a while to find sense in the structure and organize it for myself, I think, in a certain way where I could trace the arcs of certain moments and themes and characters across it. And then at a certain point, I enjoy most the part where it starts to step away from the script and you bring on other collaborators. Casting is a huge part of that when it takes a leap off the page. I have very close collaborations with my cinematographer and editor too. My cinematographer especially, we've known each other for a long time now, and we spent a long time discussing the script and developing the visual language of the film, which I think is a huge part of it. I tend to think quite visually. I write very visually. And I think that is the kind of defining part of the process. And because my relationship with Greg is quite specific, it's a process very much entwined with the development of the script as it moves forward toward production to ultimately capturing these images, or trying to extract these images from my head in a certain way.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Let's move on to the casting, of course. Paul, tell me what appealed to you about this project when you first saw the script or the outline of the script or whatever you saw.
Yeah, the first thing that jumped out to me was just the standard of writing straight off the bat, like in broad strokes. And then following on from that, I think it was to do with the duality of like the public versus private persona and the challenge that goes along with having a relationship that is like on the surface with Frankie and Sophie is like buoyant and fun and light. And then as the film progresses, you get those glimpses into what's going on with him internally. And just balancing that and trying to play that and being on the precipice before that started was really exciting. That was kind of my in, I think.
When you two met, did you discuss that together?
Did we? I think it was my main memory from the first meeting was I think we were very much on the same page. I can't really remember a lot about the first conversation other than it went very well.
Clearly it went well.
I remember ringing my agents and being like, I think it went well. Yeah.
It went very well.
Yes.
Yeah. I felt like Paul had an immediate grasp of my intention and understanding of the script in a way that few people had.
Well, that certainly comes across on screen. And Frankie, congratulations on your performance. Tell me, how did you come to get this role? What happened?
It was on my mom's Facebook page, on her teaching. What's it called? Teaching
WhatsApp groups. Was it?
Don't know what it was.
Teaching. I don't know.
What was it?
Yeah.
Facebook page.
Okay.
Yeah, teaching Facebook page and it was just asking for basically anyone who was, I don't know what the age was, I can't remember. But so my mum sent in a photo of me, and then they came back and asked for a photo, and then more videos and more photos, and until I got to go to Glasgow for an audition, and done a bunch of stuff there, and came back the next day for another audition, and then a couple of days after, I got a phone. Well, my mum got a phone from casting director saying that I had the part, so then I got involved.
How did that feel?
Crazy. And
Had you done much acting before?
no,
None at all. Wow. Gosh. And how's the journey been for you since then?
exciting, mostly exciting, crazy, exciting, crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is an exciting film. I said to you, Charlotte, earlier that honestly the buzz about this film is huge, and most of my fellow critics that I know, in fact, 100% seem to be really excited about this film. Can you talk to me a little bit more about the decisions you made in terms of how you wanted to frame this film? Was a lot of it done in the edit? Did you change things from the original script when it came to the edit?
It definitely evolved in the edit. There was a lot that we cut. The first cut was 2.5 hours, and my producers said, please never deliver a cut longer than 2 hours for this film ever again. And it was a little bit of both, I think. When I first set out to make this film and when I first conceived of the film, it was a much more straightforward story about a father and a daughter on holiday. But I think the process of revisiting memories, kind of with a new perspective, ended up seeping into the story itself. And so I wrote the film from a 2-page outline where I had organized by days, and on each day there was a series of scenes, and I was holding a lot of information in my head at this point. But when I came to actually write it, it opened with a rave, and that sequence came from some other place, and that is the greatest joy in writing for me, is discovering what you didn't know would be there. And it became inextricable from the film. I think in many ways it represented my process of making the film, and it couldn't be removed because it ultimately was the feeling and expressed the feeling that the film culminated to. But other aspects were found in the edit. At first, the same sky sequence, for example, was a problem-solving moment where quite early on we had a series of scenes and the pace was a little bit off. And I maybe went out for lunch early one day and came back, and Blair had cut this sequence together that kind of used this piece of dialogue to bridge time. And that was a strategy we repeated at certain points in the film, and I think it contributes a lot to the feeling of the film as memory. Yeah. And it is hard to imagine the film without it, but it very much was found in the edit.
That's so interesting, but it is an incredibly effective part of the film. You're right. I mean, for me, it felt like I was tapping into my own memories, even though they weren't my own memories. It's so vivid and nostalgic. Paul, what did you relate to in the script in terms of this kind of, in a way, very relatable situation of people going on a holiday, but then also, very specific?
Specific in the sense of
the father-daughter dynamic. Yeah.
I think it was the warmth is something I like attracted to the idea of love and how that manifests itself in different ways, and to get to portray really what we have seen before in kind of like a single dad, the tropes that, like, when the script was coming my way, I was thinking single dad, probably downbeat, little like neglectful, but the opposite is true of the script, and that was immediately refreshing. And to get to go into the weeds with Frankie and Charlie was just like an absolute dream. It's like, it's rare that you get a set that felt that intimate, and I'm just like warbled away. I can't remember what the question was, but yeah.
You've set the scene beautifully. And I want to ask now, Frankie, did you do many rehearsals? And if you did, what were they like?
Yeah, we had like a 2-week space for rehearsals. They were mostly just like fun. We went over the script a couple times, but mainly me and Paul would try to bond with each other.
Yeah. Tried to bond.
Try.
Yeah.
Keyword.
Yeah.
How's that going for you?
A work in progress.
And Paul, had you been on holidays like this at all? I mean, obviously not in the 90s, but for me, like, I don't know if anyone else in the room here, like, really recognised that kind of package holiday scenario. Yeah.
The one that I went on holidays with my family to Crete, and I feel like if I went back there now, it would look the exact same. And
Yeah.
of course, that's probably not true, or maybe it is, but I feel like that's the way that memory works. It's like that is the way that place will forever be in my head.
Yeah.
But even that the resort that we were in Turkey feels like, I don't know if there was much work done in terms of production to make it look more 90s. It just felt like it was
Tell us,
set in the
Charlotte.
90s,
Was
yeah.
there?
Some work was done.
Yeah. Sorry.
Like loads.
Like we built the bedroom and the bathroom. No, we worked very hard to find a location that was appropriate, and that was the challenge. And I think locations are one of the biggest lessons I think I learned on this was how creative locations can be, and how essential that is to the process. And we found this hotel that felt appropriate from the outside, and on the inside, I chose the location because it served a shot that I had very strongly in mind of Callum in the bathroom with his hand in the bucket and Sophie sitting on the bed, although as it happened she ended up in the chair. But very few rooms were big enough and laid out appropriately to serve that shot, and ultimately it was about finding a place that was right, and we were able to kind of create a room within a room and make the details perfect. There were other hotels we found that truly had not been touched.
Wow.
But they didn't work for other reasons. And I think what Paul just said is interesting, and I think of it often that you do freeze locations in mind, and there are shots in the film, especially in that kind of strange sequence of interstitials at the end that culminates in them sitting on the sea, where it feels very much like that. That was my intention, was capturing these moments that you feel are frozen forever. And in some cases, like at the amphitheater, really that view has not changed very much in 2,000 years.
Before we cut to the audience, I want to hear a bit more from Frankie. What did you learn from this? Did you learn any specific advice from Paul, for example, as a fellow actor?
Probably, but I can't remember.
Great advice.
What were the most fun parts of this for you?
Most fun parts? The whole filming. I liked getting to have a new experience and getting to have a bunch of cameras.
Is it something you want to carry on doing? Do you want to be an actor?
Yes, definitely.
Well, you are an actor, but carry on being an actor. Excellent. Well, we will be watching you. Let's cut to the audience. Put your hand up and speak clearly. Right in the front row. Thank you. You go for it.
Oh, I can just speak? Oh,
Yes,
really
just
loud.
speak. We don't have a mic. Speak loudly. I may have to repeat it on the mic.
Yeah. So I'm just really curious. Maybe this is a question for your director, Charlotte. But what was the journey towards getting film funding? What were the joys, the setbacks, the triumphs? Like, what was that journey for you? I mean, getting from that sort of treatment stage to getting the funding to actually greenlight this and go with it.
So the question was the joys of the journey of getting the funding before being greenlit. Right. Thank you.
I'm quite protective of the process of writing, and so I didn't share the script until it was quite far along. It was complete, like a complete script. I like to understand for myself exactly what my intention is before inviting other voices into the process, though I do like that part too. And I sent the script to Adela Romansky, who's a producer I had met through short films. And she came on board fairly quickly with her company Pastel, and we began to develop the script. And I think the joy, or one of the joys of this part of the process, was it felt like from that point we were always moving forward. And I feel very lucky for that to be true. So even as we worked on the script in a substantial, we did substantially develop it, it changed quite a lot from that first draft. We were always moving forward at the same time. So what that looked like was bringing it to the, I went through the Sundance Labs in 2020, shortly before the pandemic hit. And there the BBC came on board. I developed a relationship with Eva Yates by cold calling her at Sundance in 2017 when I was there with my second short Lapse. Somebody had sneaked me a delegate list, and she still worked at Film 4, and I was like, hey, I love Film 4. And she very generously met me for breakfast, and we had kind of stayed in touch, and so it was a nice partnership. And those guys had just worked together on another film, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. And again, at that point, we kept moving forward. We were introduced to Amy Jackson, who is a Scottish producer who had met Adela at that Sundance, and we started to have conversations, and it was like another member of the team. And continue to move forward, and we're very fortunate to ultimately have the support of the BFI and Screen Scotland to make the film. And it took time, but it did feel like we were always making progress. And the timeline of it all synced up quite well. But the biggest challenge was just getting the script to a place that everybody felt was ready, and ultimately because the script was quite challenging, particularly because of these rave sequences, which are so impressionistic in the film, and I think were very hard to get your head around on the page. Ultimately, as Eva, I think, once put it to me, she was like, you had such a strong sense of what you wanted that I trusted you to go and execute. I am obviously incredibly grateful she felt that way. I wasn't 100% sure it would work. I certainly hoped it would, and was willing to make it to find out. I had a sense that it could, and was just really lucky to have amazing collaborators to support that process.
That's really valuable to know. Those sequences are incredible, so congrats. Any more questions? So one over here? Yes, one over here. Thank you, at the front.
You won an award at Cannes, and have you had other positive affirmation that you've done a great job?
So the question was, you won an award at Cannes. Have you had other accolades?
Yeah, the film's won a few awards across festivals. It won the Grand Prize at Deauville in France, a prize in Munich, a prize in Sarajevo, one just last week in Bucharest for writing, which I was very flattered by.
Congrats.
Yeah, the film has been received, I think, far beyond what I ever could have conceived for it. I made this as a pretty sincere form of expression, and I'm very grateful that we had rushed so much to make the deadline at Cannes that I hadn't really had the opportunity to think about what would happen when the credits rolled, and I'm just grateful that what happened was applause and not deadly silence.
That must be a nerve-wracking moment.
Well, it wasn't, because it didn't occur to me what was happening. I was like, why aren't people leaving? Like, what is the block at the door? Yeah, and then we made Frankie stand up first, I think.
Yeah, how was Cannes for you? What did it feel like?
I'm gonna start with very hot, but it was very exciting, kind of scary, but mostly exciting and crazy. That's like the two words you're gonna hear me say a lot with every question.
Well, I understand that. I mean, it is a crazy thing at your age, but you're so good in this film. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more from Paul actually about the relationship that you built between the two of you.
Yeah,
And how
I
long did
agree.
you spend together? I mean, we touched on the rehearsal thing, but like building that relationship.
Well, it's like the 2 weeks were, they were great service to the film, but ultimately once you start, then it like compounds on itself. Like, it is a relationship that is built through trust, and when the pressure of like essentially not filming isn't on, it was easier. But once the pressure of filming kind of began, I just felt an immense sense of trust with Frankie, and it's not something that I can like quantify when it happened, like when that relationship was built. I think it's still building. It's like it
Same with
doesn't
any
stop.
relationship,
Yeah, the
right?
same
It's
with anything.
ongoing,
And
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always like
Yeah.
it's a question that I've had to answer with like other projects. It's like, how do you quantify what chemistry is? And I think it's difficult to articulate that from within it. I think it's easier probably for people who see it to articulate it, because I don't really understand what it is. I know what it is to feel it, but I don't know how to necessarily articulate it, which isn't particularly helpful, but that's just the truth of it, I think.
It's an instinctive thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. Any other questions? Yes, in the green dress at the back. Thank you.
Beautiful film, gorgeous performances. I guess this is a question for Charlotte. I was just wondering how the creatively, how the project evolved from you writing it, spending time with the actors, the rehearsal process. Some of the film feels almost improvised, and I guess I'm just interested in the flexibility for it to grow with the particular actors that you've had, and yeah, what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to think that I will meet actors halfway. I think when I cast Sophie, I imagined finding a kid where I would write for whoever we cast, because I didn't really anticipate finding a young performer who had never acted before, who could really act and separate the character from herself. And in fact, Frankie really could. And so I didn't have to rewrite that character to the extent that I thought I would. But there is definitely parts of that character that evolved with Frankie. And during that rehearsal period, we would adjust dialogue to accommodate, you know, speech patterns or what felt natural. Much of the dialogue in the film is scripted. There were moments that deviate. There were moments that I would allow the camera to roll after the scripted scene had ended. The dialogue that plays under the Polaroid is an example of that. In a wide take, I just rolled until we rolled out. There were other moments where if something wasn't feeling quite right, I would make sure we all knew where we were landing and allow the actors to find their own way there. But it is, I think, for the most part, pretty close to script, which is testament to these two.
And you're writing, quite right, yes. Great question. We've got time for one or two more questions. We've got a second one here, but if someone hasn't asked one yet and wants to do one. Yes, sorry, there's a hand up there and then the next person after that. Thank you, white shirt, yeah.
I absolutely love the soundtrack. A, had you chosen those songs beforehand? And B, why those songs in particular?
Good question.
Some of them I had. Obviously, Losing My Religion had to be pre-cleared before we performed it. Tender was in the script. Quite late on in the process, I had done an exercise in collaboration with my DP where we'd kind of cut a 15-minute reel of existing footage from other films, and there was a sequence in which I placed Tender in that worked really well, and it kind of reverse engineered it into the film in quite a similar sequence. I had a playlist that I was working from. There were many songs on it I had an ambition to include, but many of them didn't serve this scene, and ultimately that was what it was about. It was finding songs that were in service of the scene, but I think in a film that's quite quiet in many ways like this, there is going to be a tendency to read into the lyrics, and that was a really fine line to balance. There are points where it's sufficiently in the background that you're not thinking about it too much, especially in the gaming area. But Losing My Religion, even the Catatonia Road Rage cue, where it is just diegetic music and it's slightly drowned out by the game anyway, and then the music really dips and we cut to the pan of the vista from the hotel room, and suddenly the lyrics are very prominent and they're very appropriate, and that was a happy accident on the timeline where it was just extended. I hit play and realized I had struck a moment of gold. And then there's Under Pressure. I don't know if that was on your mind, but it's a place where the lyrics are very prominent and very straightforward. And it was described to me when I sent it to a friend for feedback as a capital C choice. I couldn't argue with that. It is a capital C choice, but it was a choice I think that through our aversion to exposition and a subtlety throughout the film that we felt like we could pull off. And it was a kind of happy accident one evening late in the edit room up in Edinburgh, where I pulled it in and I put it on top of our temp score and I hit play and it just worked. Music is something I use as procrastination, and I would imagine that's what I was doing in that moment. It's just kind of messing around and seeing what it was like to bring something in. And it wasn't that funny, especially for my producers. Yeah, and again, I was lucky to have their support and our music supervisor who made this happen, because there is much detail in this film to communicate the period, from the collars on shirts, which are like costume designer would like rip out and replace if they weren't quite right. But music was the biggest indicator of period, and it was a fine line to balance.
I'd imagine that song is in everyone's head right now after that film. And I love what you say about, aversion to exposition. I think that's a really key thing for me in this film. We got time for an incredibly short question. So everyone have a short question. Go on.
Frankie, what is it like going back to school after filming something like this and your friends feel like you're famous?
What's it like going back to school?
Yeah, what is
great.
it like
Great question.
going back to your everyday life after this?
It's actually pretty normal. My friends don't treat me differently. Like, oh my god, you're famous. They're still normal to me, and I like it that way.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you all so much. There's a reception afterwards if you want to come and join us. But meantime, thank you so much, Charlotte, Paul and Frankie, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations on After Sun.
Thanks for coming.